Welcome to the Knight and Rose Show, where we discuss practical ways of living out an authentic Christian worldview. Today's topic is, what should Christians think about Black Lives Matter? I'm Wintery Knight.
And I'm Desert Rose. So over the past several years, we've seen the rise of different groups claiming to have the solution to the problem of racism in America. Today, we're going to discuss the problem, the solution, and where to go from here. So, Wintery Knight, I want to start by asking you about your story. What is your ethnic background? What can you tell us about your family?
My parents were born in a Caribbean country, so I'm West Indian Black. My parents are still married, but my mom's side of the family is all Muslim, and my dad's side of the family is all Hindu, mostly Hindu and some Catholic. My parents were pretty poor. My dad's family worked on land that they didn't own, picking crops. And my mom's side of the family rented out bulls for people who wanted to pull stuff around. It's like renting out tractors, but not quite the same.
Wow, bulls.
Yeah. My descendants were slaves brought over from Africa, and I grew up poor as well. I didn't have a bicycle until I was in grade 6, and we didn't have a family car until I was in grade 8.
Interesting. Wow. So how and why did you immigrate to the United States?
It was my dad helped me a little by picking my major for me. I wanted to study English because I really love English literature. But he decided that I was going to study computer science because he really loved me not living at home. Computer science was hard for me. I remember I failed my first test in second year calculus, and I was always crying when I was trying to understand it. But eventually I got my degree. And it was around that time when I was doing my undergraduate that I noticed that a lot of social conservatives were getting persecuted or censored. So as I was working my way through my bachelor's and master's, I started to think about moving to another country where I would have more freedom, like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and even more prosperity. The taxes were very high where I'm from, too. So I started collecting credentials to be able to meet the requirements to get naturalized in America. So not only did I get those degrees, but I also got a provisional patent, a publication, like a peer-reviewed publication. I presented at a conference, basically building up all the things that they would want so that I could immigrate in a high merit, very selective category. And after 16 years of working in information technology, my employer sponsored me for a green card and I got it. And then I had to wait a few more years until I could get citizenship, but I just got it recently.
Wow. So it sounds like that process was pretty challenging for you and that, it wasn't the result of just getting lucky or having some sort of just amazing IQ in math or science or technology or, the life plan for so many Americans of follow your heart.
Yeah. Don't follow your heart.
So tell us, how has this worked out for you? Where are you now?
Yeah, so I just got citizenship recently. I did have to spend a long time renting, and that kind of hurt my finances. But right now, I'm on track to retire pretty soon. I'm sitting on about $1 million in cash. My house is fully paid off. I bought it for cash. It was a new construction home. And this kind of financial success, it was despite me being terrible at making financial decisions. I have so many stories I could tell you about just not doing the right thing and so on. But the important thing is that the prosperity is there. And I have the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion to have a blog where I get to say what I want on the most important issues. And a podcast now with you where we get to just speak our minds and not care what anyone thinks.
Yes.
I live in a nice semi-rural area where I am safe from crime and violence.
Wow. And you said you're close to retirement, and I happen to know how young you are. That's pretty remarkable.
I'm in my mid 40s, and I think probably, most people are surprised that you can, save that much wealth. But like I said, the Christian worldview sets priorities on you. And my priorities are not spending money, not signaling status, and giving, charity to other groups. So it just piles up.
Yeah. Wow. So this is really interesting in light of comments like those from, for example, Nicole Hannah-Jones, the author of the 1619 Project, who claim that there's nothing Black people can do to help themselves or to reverse the racism of the past. So let me read a quote of hers. She says, to summarize, none of the actions we are told Black people must take if they want to lift themselves out of poverty and gain financial stability, not marrying, not getting educated, not saving more, not owning a home, can mitigate 400 years of racialized plundering. So this doesn't seem to be your experience. I mean,
No. What is she talking about?
yeah, wow. I mean, so what's the difference? Why not? What happened to you?
Yeah, she must be living in some other country than America, because that's exactly the right path to prosperity. Trust me, I know. So the reason I talked about all that stuff is to kind of show that I started off on home plate and I had to round 3 bases and come back to home. Whereas blacks who are born in America, they start out on third base. And they don't have to have the immigration battle. They don't have to rent for 20 years, because the reason, why do you rent for 20 years? I didn't, 16 years. Why did you rent? Oh, no, 20 years. Yeah, 16 years. And then I got the green card, and then I waited a little bit before buying a house. So, why would you throw money away, to landlords? And the answer is, if you lose your job, you get deported. So I'm not going to have a fire sale of a house. So I just rented and rented and rented. Well, blacks who are born in America, they don't have to do that.
Right.
So they're already in great shape compared to me, who has all kinds of other problems. And I have no family here. Like, I'm all alone. So it's even harder than you think. But I would say the difference between me and Nicole Hannah-Jones is basically that I actually was transformed by my experience of becoming a Christian, and it resulted in completely different priorities and decisions. So when I started out, I got a New Testament from the Gideons when I was in grade 5. And I read it. They have like a 2-year schedule at the front of it. And I read it for 2 years. And then I said, this reads like history. It sounds good. It kind of fits with some intuitions I had about objective morality and the origin of the universe, which were things that were occurring to me or had been presented to me at that time, even when I was very young. I augmented that Bible reading with apologetics and just gradually taking seriously the reality of God and the character of Jesus changed all my priorities and my decision making. So what I would say to Nicole Hannah-Jones is, people start off being their own worst enemy. And the more that they focus on themselves, the harder it is for them to straighten up and function at a high level. So in my case, the Christian worldview ruled out things like having a TV. So I didn't have a TV for 15 years after I came to America. And I only bought one because my coworkers bullied me into it. And I only use it for watching StarCraft 2 like tournaments. There was a recent global tournament. I was very excited to watch that. But I don't watch like TV that's made in Hollywood. I don't believe in, their worldview. Right. So just cutting out entertainment of every kind is really good. Cutting out alcohol, cutting out drugs, not chasing women and trying to improve your self-esteem by betting a whole bunch of women is really good for you.
Yep. Imagine that. What God says is really good for you.
Yeah, but like I said, this you don't look at the Bible and think, how can this be good for me? It's more like you look at the Bible and go, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. Do I like sitcoms? Do I like New Girl? And the answer is no, I don't like it. So I don't watch it. I have probably really different Christian role models than Nicole Hannah-Jones and the Black Lives Matter people. I mentioned this in a previous episode. I like Dr. Walter Bradley, who made a huge difference as a Christian, giving lectures all over America on evidence for Christianity and so on.
Yeah, he's excellent.
Yeah. And I spend most of my time just talking to other Christians and participating in gospel enterprises with them.
Wow. Yeah, very different path than what we so frequently see coming out of the typical person born in America. So let's talk about one group in particular that's been in the news quite a bit over the past couple of years that goes by the name Black Lives Matter. What problems is the Black Lives Matter organization trying to solve?
Yeah, so I haven't really looked into them too much, but I read over their website and I've obviously heard about them and seen them in the news. And it seems to me that two of their big priorities are they are concerned that the police are biased against Black people and that they are using excessive force, even to the point of having armed white policemen kill unarmed Blacks. And they think this is happening a lot, so much that out of all the problems that Black people face in America, this one, it needs to be the focus. And the other problem that they've got is wealth inequality. So they're looking at their neighbors and of different, they're looking at their white neighbors really, and they're saying, I don't have as much as you. And they think that this is because of systemic racism. It's not because they aren't doing the right things. It's because the system is working against them on the basis of their skin color.
Okay, so let's look at these problems individually. What is the evidence for anti-Black police bias?
Well, I mean, they're saying specifically this unarmed Black was killed by these white police officers. And if you count the number of times that happened, The last time I talked about this in a podcast with Tim Stratton, I used the 2019 numbers. Then 9 unarmed blacks were shot. So I looked up the numbers for the most recent year for this podcast, and it's down to 6 unarmed blacks that were shot in 2021. Now, every unarmed black that's shot, that needs some investigation. That's not a good thing. But 6 unarmed blacks?
Wait a minute. Six unarmed blacks. So are you saying like 6 for every 1,000 people, or what? Can you clarify that?
No, I'm talking 6 unarmed blacks total for the entire year in America.
For the whole year in America?
Right.
Wow. That is not the impression that is given by our media or by activists I've heard from.
Yeah, like wow. I look at tweets on from like the woke evangelical elites on Twitter, and they're all concerned about this. And I'm just thinking, nobody broke into the computer lab in my office and tried to shoot me. So I'm pretty sure there's something wrong, with the people who are being shot. There's something about them that is exposing them to the police. But the other thing is that the much bigger problem is that thousands of blacks a year are killed. Except 90% of those blacks that are killed by other blacks. So why aren't we fussing about that? I think that's a much bigger problem.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, you mentioned, are there different, is there more going on than what we're told about? And I've read about some of these stories of unarmed blacks being shot by police. And it seems like in almost every case, it has happened after a violent struggle in which the person being stopped by police resisted arrest. Some of them had long criminal records. Some were on drugs. And in the cases where the officers were inappropriate, they were charged with murder or manslaughter, and justice was done. So that really brings a bigger perspective to these cases. So tell us, speaking of police encounters, have you ever encountered the police or any type of police brutality?
The only encounters I've had with the police have been when I got pulled over for speeding. So I have this car, I have a black convertible, and it's like a roadster. So it's like a sports car. It's got a rear wheel differential, 50-50 weight distribution, torque sensing, limited slip. The battery of the car is in the trunk, and it's just totally designed for maneuverability and speed. And I am not able to resist this. So I'm very frequently going over the speed limit. And I usually get pulled over for speeding about once every 3 or 4 years. I should not be saying this. But so that's the limit of my encounters with the police. And here's how it goes. I see the flashing lights and I pull over on the side of the road. If it's nighttime, I turn on the dome light. If it's daytime, I put the top down if it's not already down. And I put my hands on the steering wheel where they can see it. They come over and they write me a ticket, or they let me off. Usually they write me a ticket and I just pay it by mail. And you just have to be really respectful. Don't challenge their authority. Don't get violent. And just say, yes, sir, no, sir, and accept responsibility. And just look at the speeding ticket as a tax on having an awesome car.
Yeah, that is, it's really interesting that you mentioned that. I have some friends who are Black who will sometimes post on social media that it's so unfortunate that in today's day and age, Black men have to have the Black talk with their sons and tell them that if they're ever stopped by police, they need to put their hands on the steering wheel and they need to be respectful. They need to do whatever the police say. This strikes me as odd that this is considered, the Black talk to have with your son if you're Black, because that sounds exactly like the talk that my dad had with me when I was 15 and that my mom had with me again when I was 16, and that my driver's ed teacher had with me when I was 15 and again when I was 16. So this, I don't think this is a Black talk. I think this is common wisdom that needs to be passed on from parents to their children. It's just what everybody needs to do.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are just regular guys and girls, they can be really stressed out. It's a very stressful job. They're not going to be perfect all the time, but they're carrying a loaded weapon. So this just isn't the time to challenge them. The time to challenge them is maybe later in court, where you say, hey, this person didn't follow the law. They were mean to me. And you might win your case there, but don't challenge an armed person who has a stressful job.
Yeah, in fact, that's exactly what I did on one occasion when I was stopped and charged with something that I believed was completely unfair. And I knew that was not the time to challenge it. But I received my ticket, which had a court date on it. And I showed up for court and I was given the opportunity to present my case and I won. And I actually was let off. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That is not the time to challenge the officer when he's under stress and carrying a weapon and doesn't know how you're going to respond. You go to court and you figure it out there.
Yep.
So let's talk about the other, another perceived problem from Black Lives Matter. What is the evidence of wealth inequality in America?
Well, there are differential levels of income, but it's probably not what they think. So I'm looking at the data from the U.S. Census of 2018, and they have split out the household income of a variety of different ethnicities. So whites make about $68,000 per household. Now, you would think that they would be at the top and that all the non-white ethnicities would be at the bottom if there was systemic racism. But it turns out that there are 15 non-white ethnicities that out-earn whites.
Wow, 15.
15 non-white ethnicities that out-earn whites. And this isn't one person. This is the average household income. So these ethnicities as a whole have somehow figured out how to live so that they can out-earn white Americans, and racism isn't holding them back. Let me show you these numbers. So Indian Americans, East Indian Americans, they make about $120,000 a year in terms of household income. Pakistani Americans, $77,315. Americans from Ghana, like Ghana in Africa, $69,343 household income. And Nigerians also from Africa. So we're talking, continental African blacks, $68,658. White Americans are lower down and they're making $67,937.
Wow. That is really, truly fascinating. I mean, it seems like the people who are complaining about systemic racism are not making the same choices that these groups are making. It seems like there has to be something culturally significant going on there.
Yeah, it's not skin color.
Right,
yeah.
right. Exactly.
It's not skin color. Whatever is holding back blacks that they're concerned about, it's not racial discrimination, because these other races would be suffering as well.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's talk about the proposed BLM solutions. What are they proposing? What do they think is the solution to these perceived problems?
Okay. So the first problem was police bias, and their solution is defund the police.
Wow. Defund, like get rid of them?
Yeah. Like reduce their budget to zero and eliminate them and replace them with something else. So,
okay.
Yeah, we're going to see how that works out in a minute. And then also on their website, I'm not sure why they say this, but they seem to regard marriage as a big problem. And so they say, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure.
Wow. So nuclear family structure. So as in like a mother and a father raising their children?
Yeah, that's bad. It's really, really bad. It's causing all these, it's causing the police problem and the wealth inequality. I don't know.
Wow.
I just report what they say.
And it's interesting that they would call that Western prescribed, because that sounds an awful lot like God prescribed in Genesis 2.
Yeah.
Not in the Western world.
Yeah. Jesus talks about that. A man and a woman shall leave their mother and father and form one flesh marriages. And then naturally, that's where children come from and so on. So one thing I should note is that I noticed that all the Black Lives Matter founders are Marxists. And I think that a lot of their remedies are related to Marxist economics as well.
Okay, wow. So Black Lives Matter seems to be a very deceptive name. It's clearly not just about valuing Black lives, but about tearing down the structures that have been at the foundation of America since its beginning and totally remaking America. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I think if you're talking about just basically they're not comfortable with law enforcement. They're not comfortable with marriage and the family, and they're not comfortable with the free enterprise system. And just to talk about the free enterprise system, we're talking about things like private property, the rule of law, free trades, and so on. So
wow, yeah. And as someone who's worked throughout the developing world and read lots of stats and books on these topics, these seem to be the what economists prescribe as making all the difference for raising people up out of poverty. So, but let's
no,
before
I have to interrupt you. So
okay.
Related to that, there's an excellent book written by Wayne Grudem and I think Barry Alverson or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the title is called The Poverty of Nations. It's kind of a play off of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. Basically, they analyze all of the different countries based on these criteria for what they think makes a country wealthy or poor. So
we should link to that in the description box as well.
Definitely.
That's a great recommendation.
I think if people are recommending an economic system that is known to result in poverty, they should definitely be more evidence driven, because we should do what works. We shouldn't do what sounds good to us.
Yeah, exactly. So let's kind of step back maybe for a second and go back to that first prescription of BLM, defunding the police.
Defunding the police, yeah.
Will that help Black people in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, like I said, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, right? So we have the data. The data is that, like, I just tweeted something this morning about Portland, Oregon, and somebody made a chart of the number of homicides in Portland. And Portland is one of these cities that's very progressive, and they took seriously this plan of defunding the police. They slashed their police budget. A lot of major cities did that. And what happened in Portland is the number of homicides doubled and tripled in every year since they did that. And
shocker.
This past year was the highest year. Yeah. So no, it hasn't worked out. I mean, it hasn't worked out for regular law-abiding Blacks.
Yeah.
You know?
And from what I've seen, I mean, when your average kind of, Black person who's, walking down the street, minding their business, going to work, is interviewed and asked what they think about that policy, they're horrified by the thought. So I don't think that this is something that most Black people want. It's certainly not something I would want. Let's look at another prescribed solution of BLM. Will destroying the nuclear family help Blacks? What impact is that likely to have?
Yeah, so we were looking at those other ethnicities like the Indian Americans and Pakistani Americans, and we were wondering, well, what is it? What have they got that makes them so special? It isn't the white skin color. It's got to be something else, and it is something else. So let's take a look at the data from the U.S. census that was released in 2019. According to that data, the single mother poverty rate was 34%. So 34% of single mothers are under the poverty line. But if you look at married couples, their poverty rate was 6%. So
wow,
marriage makes a huge difference, which is exactly what Black Lives Matter is telling us to abolish.
Yep. Wow. Exactly the opposite of what's needed.
Yeah. So you have anybody who listens to them is literally taking advice that's going to make them poorer.
Wow. What else do you have for us? What do you think about with regard to the nuclear family?
Yeah. So I saw this study from the Stanford University Center for Education Policy Analysis. They said that 65% of Black students are being raised by single parents, whereas 15% of Asian students were being raised by single parents. So I don't know about you, but I think it's a lot easier to monitor the homework and school of the children if there is a mom in the home, or at least if there's two people sharing the duties of parenting. I saw another study about the amount of time being spent on homework as well. And Asians spend like 2 hours a night or something on homework. I'll put the link in the notes, but it's much, much lower for Black students. And so I think, I think education is really important. And it certainly works better in cases where there are two parents in the home. So
yeah, undoubtedly. And that really lines up with a great book I read years ago by David Blankenhorn called Fatherless America. I mean, that was written in 1996.
Yeah, I have the book.
Okay, yeah. And so, he was drawing attention to what was a huge problem in the 1990s, and it's just gotten worse since then. Yeah. So, this is something that needs to be taken really seriously. And yet Black Lives Matter is trying to do the exact opposite. That's just tragic.
Yeah, I think what the problem is that in the Black community, there's a 72 or 73% out of wedlock birth rate. And the response of pretty much everyone is not to say, let's take a look at what the Bible teaches about the timing of marriage and child raising. It's kind of to say, let's not judge. Let's not make any judgments. Let's not say that there's any way that's right. And they think that by being very permissive and being very tolerant and inclusive, that they're helping. But actually what happens is that children raised in single parent households are more likely to be poor. They're more likely to do less homework. They're more likely to do poorly in school. You're really not helping anybody by lowering the bar.
Yeah, and there's a much higher crime rate among boys who have been raised without a father in the home as well.
Yeah, a whole host of problems. The girls raised in the home tend to become sexually active at an earlier age,
Right.
because they're looking for male validation that should be provided by the father. So this isn't an accident. When people decide that they're going to get into the bedroom and do things that produce children, we have to draw a line and say, well, you need to be committed first, because children do better when there are two committed parents there who are focused on raising them properly. So the nuclear family is critical to the success of Blacks, just like it's critical to the success of other non-white races who outperform whites in this country. I'm sorry, but we have to learn from what is working. And what is working is what Indian Americans and Pakistani Americans, Nigerian Americans, Ghanaian Americans, and all of the Asians are doing.
Yeah. Excellent. So let's talk about that third proposed solution that you mentioned from BLM, the
Marxism?
Yes, Marxism. So just in case people aren't quite familiar with a couple of these terms, with regard to capitalism, buyers and sellers have to agree before a trade is made. So a seller can set a price, but if buyers don't like that price, they don't have to buy anything. They don't have to buy from that seller. They can go to another seller. They have many different options. It's only when both people agree that the price and the quality are favorable to them that a trade occurs. Okay. And so it's very market driven. And how much is produced is, really dependent on how much of a demand there is. If people want more, then sellers make more. If people don't want what they're selling, they can make something else. In contrast with Marxism, the central government decides what is going to be produced, how much of it is going to be produced, how much it's going to sell for. And so, the government is really guessing and saying this, we're just going to produce this such and such amount of bread. And if there's not enough, well, oops. If there's too much, well, oops. And then the government redistributes wealth so that everybody is equally poor, basically.
From each according to his ability to each according to his need is what I think Marx would say.
Yes.
So you're trusting this central government to equalize life outcomes regardless of the decision making of the people.
Right. And interestingly, they don't equalize it for themselves with everybody else. It in every case I've ever seen of Marxism, the handful of people who run things tend to have a whole lot of wealth, and everybody else tends to be poor.
Because humans aren't angels. They're not going to act perfectly, especially when you give them power.
Right, exactly. So how is this likely to work out? We've already given a few clues.
Yeah. So I use this approach a lot in the workplace. I had a couple of, most recently, I had a couple of senior engineers that I was working with in another company that I'm with now. And they were both raised in Christian homes, and they were both voting. They were going to vote for Joe Biden and for Democrats. So we were talking about this. And I said to them, I think that you should understand that if you vote for Marxist policies, and, not everything has to be fully communist in order to be Marxist. There are degrees of socialism. I said, take a look at this list of ratings of different countries' economies called the Index of Economic Freedom. So on this page, it's put up by the Heritage Foundation, which is a big Washington think tank. They basically list out all of the criteria. This is similar to Wayne Grudem's book. They list out all the things that matter in an economy, like the rule of law and unbiased courts and private property and the ease of starting a business, just tax rates, income tax rates, and so on. They rank all the countries, and the countries at the top, these are the ones that they call economically free. Okay. So at the top, you find countries like Singapore and Switzerland and Ireland, and then maybe a little further down, countries like Canada and the United States. Okay. And what you find with those top countries that are the most economically free, that is the most not socialist, their citizens have the highest per capita GDP.
Okay. Yeah.
They produce the most. Okay. And so even if you're living in a country like Ireland where the tax rates are high, at least those people will be able to earn a lot. So they still have a good living. All right. But the bottom countries are countries like North Korea and Venezuela that we already talked about both of those in other podcasts. But in those countries, there is no private property. The government owns the means of production. They own, Venezuela nationalized the largest oil company in Venezuela. And in those countries where they've embraced Marxism, those citizens have the lowest per capita GDP.
Yep, exactly. I actually had a lot of friends from Venezuela when I was a kid living in Florida playing tennis who I met at the country club. And Venezuela used to be a very wealthy country. Then it went communist and has become poorer and poorer ever since. And as we talked about in a previous episode, now, it is an utter disaster of poverty with people, eating their pets and such just to stay alive. In contrast, the country of Chile used to be very poor. Then it became more capitalist, and now it's a lot wealthier. I mean, right around the same time, these two countries made these foundational changes, and we're seeing the results. That's something we absolutely have to pay attention to. And again, like I've said before, this is not some new idea that we're just trying to figure out the results of. Marxism has been around for a very long time. There is a whole lot of data, and not only do we have to consider poverty as an issue resulting from Marxism, but also communism in practice has resulted in the deaths of 100 million people in the 21st century. Communism is not a neutral philosophy. It is. Right. It results in more murders, more deaths than all religious wars combined. And I don't think most people know that.
Well, speaking of religion, do you know what the Bible has to say about, these concerns that are being raised by Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Bible teaches that our biggest problem is separation from God. While it is tragic when any human life is lost, when any image bearer is poorly treated and harmed and killed, it is not, 6 unarmed Black men being killed that is our greatest problem, or wealth disparities, all the more so that are our biggest problem. Those are not even on the radar throughout the Bible as some huge problem that we need to do something about, but rather Paul talks about how we need to learn to be content in whatever our circumstances financially. And so we also learn about in the Bible how all ethnicities, people of all colors of skin, are equal in worth and value and dignity in the eyes of God and have equal access to salvation. I mean, this life is a little blip in time, and eternity is going to last forever. So we need to get right with God. But, following Jesus means self-denial. It means enduring suffering. We are promised suffering. We are promised discrimination by the world. And it's not something that we need to respond to with getting revenge or stealing from others or destroying property or any of these completely unbiblical and evil responses that we've been seeing from people who think that, life isn't fair. And yeah, shocker, life isn't fair. Something I was told when I was 5 years old. It's not going to be fair. We certainly need to advocate for policies that reflect our biblical beliefs and values. I mean, we did a whole episode on that a week ago and how important that is. But our focus, our main focus needs to be on loving God and loving our neighbors, not on our status or our grievances or what made us feel bad, and certainly not on coveting what our neighbor has. I mean, as soon as we start comparing ourselves to others based on what they have and what we have and what the differences are, we are in sin. We're told to work hard in our education, in our vocation, to earn money so that we can partner with others for the gospel. Paul talks about that in Philippians. So these are the types of things that we're supposed to be focused on as Christians.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my case, I would say that I certainly don't have the bad outcomes that they're talking about in terms of being mistreated by the police or having less wealth than the average white person. So I would just say that the reason for my differences that are not what they're expecting is because I take Christianity seriously. and it governs my decisions in terms of, like I said before, in terms of how much I prioritize entertainment, how hard I work in school, what I choose to study, whether I'm interested in having a certain status from my neighbors or whether I am more interested in giving a charitable donation.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I would say is that I've had my life change as a result of becoming a Christian, and that's changed all of my priorities. And so I'm authentically Christian. And some people might say, well, you're not acting, the way that we expect you to act based on your skin color. You have the skin color that we have. You have to act like us. And I would just say skin color is nothing to me, and Christianity is everything to me. I wouldn't even say if the two conflict. It's that one is nothing and the other is everything. And so the decisions that I make are flowing entirely from my Christian worldview. And if that's the case, at least in my case, I'm not going to have those problems that they're concerned about.
Yeah, great word. Excellent. So what decisions should an American of any skin color make in order to stay out of poverty?
Yeah, there was an article by a Black economist, not Thomas Sowell this time, Walter Williams, who used to be the
another great one. Yes.
Him and Sowell are the best. So he used to be the chair of economics at the Department of Economics at George Mason University. And he once wrote an article called How to Not Be Poor. And this was for everybody. So it wasn't for one skin color or another. And he said, just do this. Graduate from high school, get married before you have children, stay married, and then take any kind of a job, even one that pays the minimum wage, because you're going to move up. All right. And don't commit any crimes. Don't engage in criminal behavior. He said, if you do all that stuff, if as a single or as two people, you're going to be above the poverty line in America. And your path to prosperity is assured, because always when you have experience on your resume, you get better jobs and your income grows. Man, I'm making more than double what I started with when I got out of school now. And I'm not even, I wouldn't even say my salary is especially high for the industry that I'm in. So.
Wow. I mean, and these are very attainable. I mean, graduate from high school, don't have children out of wedlock, get any job, and don't be a criminal. That seems, wow. Wow. I mentioned before when I was talking about what the Bible says that we are called as Christians to impact the world. And we did a whole episode on policy last week. And we do agree that laws and policies matter, and they should matter to Christians, because people are greatly affected by policies, and people matter to God. Yeah. So what sort of policies and laws should Christians support if we want to encourage and support Black people and their thriving?
Yeah. So after apologetics, I recommend people Christian study policy. So I read a lot about it, and I have a lot of ideas about this. So here's one. So to solve the fatherlessness problem, I recommend switching single mother welfare into tax deductions for each parent, based on the child's income up to age 25. And don't make the child pay income tax up to age 25. All right. So
yeah, excellent.
You have a child, it has one or two parents. If the child is working before age 25, the child pays no income tax, and the parents get a tax deduction for some percentage of the child's income. But each parent gets a tax deduction. So if there's two parents, then they both get a tax deduction. And so that's an incentive for them to stay married and raise kids who will make a ton of money. So another one is for education. So right away, every conservative says this: eliminate the federal Department of Education, and I would eliminate federal school subsidies of any kind, and replace them with transferable taxpayer-funded education savings accounts that are attached to each child. So this is like Ben Carson's health savings accounts, which is another good policy.
Yes, such a good idea. Yes.
Right. So give the kids, $1,000 a year into this account, and if they use it for education, great. But if they don't use it and they just go into a trade, they can give it to somebody else in their family. The main thing is that there's an incentive there for them to think about what bang they're getting for the buck, because this is their money, right? And so they will think, what should I study in order to maximize the return on this? I don't want to blow this money on a degree that doesn't get me any return. So maybe petroleum engineering rather than women's studies. Okay.
Yep.
will be the decision there. And that's another thing, is if we're going to give student loans, don't let the government make those decisions, because the government doesn't care whether they get the money back. The people making those decisions, they don't care. Make the banks make the decisions. And then the banks will tell you, hey, we'll give you the loan if you study medicine, but we're not giving you the loan if you study, I hate to say this, philosophy. Now they're all going to be mad at me, but that's okay because they can't afford weapons. The other thing that I would do is I would privatize Social Security. Blacks don't live as long typically as other ethnicities, so they're never going to collect on this. So why are we making them pay for this? Don't. Just give them private retirement accounts. Again, we can match their contributions. You know, if they put in 1,000, we'll match 1,000. Government matches 1,000. If they put in 5,000, the government matches, say, 2,500, and that will encourage people to save for their own retirement and be independent.
Yep, definitely.
And just in general, I'm all in favor of tax-free transferable savings accounts. Canada had tax-free savings accounts for a long time under Stephen Harper. And you would have a certain limit. You could put in a certain amount of money and you wouldn't pay any tax on any money that you made. And you could put it into a bank account. You could put it in the stock market. But the point is that you didn't pay tax on anything you made off of these accounts. There was an annual contribution limit. And if you needed the money back, you just pulled it out, no penalties. And people were like, great. And they maxed out those things every year. Turning people into savers, giving them the incentive to make more responsible decisions about marriage, children, education, retirement, healthcare, debt, wealth. This is how we're going to solve poverty.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'm all for privatizing anything that could possibly be privatized, and rewarding people for making good decisions and encouraging them, incentivizing good decisions, as opposed to what our government seems to do so frequently.
That's what private charity is for, right? You make a mistake in your life, you have private charity, you have the church to turn to. I think the government really should provide incentives for people to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And that way, you know, as you've said before, if people get into a ton of trouble and they need help getting out of it, you know, they can go to the church and the church can help them financially. But the church can also say, yeah, you know why you got into all this trouble? You know, here's some money and here's a brand new worldview. And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that sounds so terrible. And yet that's exactly what worked for me.
Right.
The
right,
worldview
exactly.
is more precious than anything else. It's the relationship with God and literally an alternative set of priorities for you to pursue rather than your own that's going to save you.
Absolutely.
The more you sacrifice your own interests in order to look at authenticating yourself as a Christian and making decisions that are respectful of what Jesus would like you to do, you're your own worst enemy.
Yeah, really good discussion. I appreciate you sharing your experience and all of your knowledge on this important topic.
Thank you. All right, and that's a good place for us to end. If you enjoy the show, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. You can find the references for this episode on winterynight.com. That's WINTERYKNIGHT.com. We appreciate you taking the time to listen, and we'll see you again in the next one.